I didn't order for you, my husband said, his voice soft like a velvet-covered slap, while he and his friends slowly carved into $1,000 Wagyu like they were performing some luxury ritual, and I sat there with a perfectly white plate in front of me, empty, exactly the way they wanted, while Sloane, my husband's mistress, leaned in with a smirk shaped like she'd just seen something stuck under her shoe and said, "Next time bring snacks, Natalie." And I just smiled as LeClaire wrapped itself in that kind of silence you have to pay for. Not the gentle kind, but the kind where crystal glasses whisper against mahogany and every fork tapping a plate sounds like a bell announcing your net worth. The kind of silence that wraps around your neck like velvet and slowly tightens if you sit in the wrong place. And I was sitting exactly where they wanted me, at the end of the table, where the light didn't reach, watching Theodore, 38, a man with a smile meant to conquer boardrooms, but tonight using it to sink me, cut into a piece of meat that could feed a family for a week, while Sloane closed her eyes halfway as she chewed and then turned to me with syrup in her voice and said, "Natalie, you should try this place sometime," pausing with her fork floating midair, before smiling that familiar cruel smile and adding, "Oh right, I forgot. Your artist salary probably isn't enough." And the whole table laughed, not awkwardly, but like people enjoying the finale of a reality show where they were waiting for me to break, where my tears would be entertainment. People like Harper, the divorce lawyer, who treats marriage like a contract and divorce like a paycheck and has been divorced 3 times. Vanessa, the influencer, who lives off an engagement ring and over-edited photos. Thomas, the healthy lifestyle brand owner, who mostly posts pictures of his button leggings. And Nathan, yes, a woman named Nathan, who works in private equity and talks about restructuring, like a priest talks about salvation. And then there was Sloane herself, the pure version of the cruelty Theodore still tried to hide, slicing her $1,000 steak with a silver knife in a dress worth someone's monthly salary, her nails painted a red so dark it looked like dried blood, repeating, "Really should have brought snacks," with emphasis to make sure I heard every drop of contempt, and they all laughed again. Even a server near the kitchen let the corner of his mouth twitch, while I stared at my empty plate, my empty glass, my empty place at my own husband's birthday dinner, and something shifted in my chest. Not pain. I was too numb for pain, not breaking. I had broken months ago when the betrayal started leaking through the cracks. This was clarity, because what they didn't know was that I had expected every bit of this, every look, every word, every laugh, ever since 3 weeks ago when Theodore said he wanted a small, intimate birthday dinner with friends, and touched my hand in a way that used to mean intimacy, but now felt like a transaction meant to lure me into being the audience for their show. And I nodded like the wife trying to hold on to something dead, until 2 weeks ago when everything showed its cards, and I came home early, hoping for silence. But instead, hearing Theodore's voice floating down from the bedroom, bright and excited, like someone planning a prank, saying, "She actually thinks she's invited. I told her I ordered for her. It's going to be hilarious." While Sloane's voice poured in like oil on fire. "You're not letting her eat anything, right? God, Natalie sitting there would be so embarrassing," followed by the same laughter I heard tonight, and Theodore adding, "No, she'll just sit there watching us eat. It'll be better." And Sloane saying through the speakerphone, "That's so mean. Perfect for your birthday," before the sounds of bodies, movement, soft moans filled the room, and I stood in the dark hallway of the house that used to belong to both of us, watching the truth spread open in front of me, their words becoming evidence of what they thought would stay in the air, and what I felt wasn't pain, but relief, because I finally saw Theodore exactly as he was. No love, no respect, not a shred of decency, just contempt dressed in expensive cologne and pretty words for outsiders. And right then, I knew exactly what I would do, turning off the recording app I had switched on the moment I heard strange noises, and quietly walking out of the house. A CT2, Act 2, single paragraph. So for the past 2 weeks, I prepared, not emotionally. Those things had been drained out of me long ago, but practically, coldly, thoroughly. And I made calls, sent emails, booked meetings with lawyers, pulled out connections I had kept tucked away in dusty drawers for years, moved money, separated accounts, closed the credit cards Theodore used to spend money that wasn't his, collected every fraudulent invoice, every expense report he faked for his company, every hotel receipt he labeled as client service on a business trip, and I also called the car company, my voice so calm even I barely recognized it. The G-Wagon is under my name, right? I want it repossessed. Date? Time? Yes. Just take it back. And they agreed, quickly, like they had been expecting the call all along. And during those 2 weeks, I still smiled at Theodore every morning when pouring coffee, still let him kiss my cheek each night, as if our marriage hadn't rotted from the roots. Still pretended to be the devoted wife who would attend her husband's birthday dinner. And that is exactly why I'm sitting here now, at this long table draped in white linen, with the empty plate they set for me. No order for me, thank you, I had told the server when he brought the menu the first time, and his eyes flickered with understanding. Maybe he had seen people like me before, people forgotten next to the loud, newly rich crowd, and he gave a slight nod and stepped away. And now, as they devour their $1,000 steaks, I lean back and observe, listening to Harper talk about her latest divorce case involving a CFO hiding assets under his cousin's name. He thought he could outsmart me. Harper laughed. Now his wife gets the company parking spot, too. And the table buzzed with admiration, while Vanessa passed her phone around, showing her Maldives trip. Her 4th surprise proposal this year, from some man none of us could remember. And a new bag someone said was custom-made, saying it with the same reverence people reserve for holy relics. Thomas was complaining about anti-fans in his comments section. Just because 3 people got hospitalized from my new candy product, they're jealous, he said, chewing asparagus that must have cost $40. Poor people are always like that. And Nathan was going on about her new deal, buying up cheap apartment complexes to turn them into luxury condos. The old tenants complain nonstop. She shrugged. But it's the market. Adapt or disappear. And these were the close friends Theodore chose, the people he admired and wanted praise from. I looked at Theodore, really looked, at the way he held his fork, the way he smiled, a gesture clearly practiced in the mirror, always glancing around to check if anyone was laughing with him, the way he touched his new watch in that subtle, showy way, the watch he bought using my inheritance. He caught me staring. What? He frowned. Why are you looking at me like that? And I said, just thinking about stuff. And he replied, don't think. You kill the mood. And Sloane leaned forward. Does she always sit there like a ghost? Theodore, I don't get how you stand it. And Theodore shrugged. I'm not sure I do. And the whole table laughed again. The server poured wine for everyone except me. I didn't get wine, didn't even get water. I wasn't given anything except a white plate to watch them perform. And I checked the time. 8:50 p.m., 10 more minutes, 10 minutes before the final curtain dropped, because while I was sitting here silent and looking pathetic, 3 things were happening at the same time. First, every supplementary credit card with Theodore's name, the cards he used to buy bags, shoes, trips for Sloane, the cards he thought I didn't know about, were being declined one by one. I had already arranged it yesterday. Second, the white G-Wagon he parked at home this morning, because Thomas picked him up in a Bentley, was on its way to being towed back to the dealership, and the repossession staff didn't care whose birthday it was. Third, a long email filled with evidence was landing in the inbox of Theodore's company. Fake invoices, client meeting, expenses that were actually bar nights with Sloane, overtime days I knew he had spent in hotels. I didn't gather these things because I wanted revenge. I started finding them 6 months ago, when I realized our marriage had turned into an empty play, and I kept them hoping I'd never need them. But hope is a funny thing. It dies slowly, then dies all at once. A CT3. Sloane was staring at me, her head tilted like a predator studying prey. You know, she said to the whole table, but kept her eyes on me. I think Natalie actually likes this. Some women don't know their place. And Harper laughed sharply. Not true, Sloane. Sometimes they just pretend not to know. While Theodore smirked without stopping her, and Harper nodded like she was analyzing a case. There's research on it. Some people settle because they're scared of being alone or scared they don't have enough money to start over. No self-respect, no backbone, just existing. Pathetic. And Thomas scoffed. Like her. And the whole table burst into laughter. I smiled too. A real smile. Not the polite pressed lip expression I had worn for months. That's right, I said. And the table faltered. Theodore frowned. Sloane narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Theodore asked, his tone already sharp. Knowing exactly where you stand, I said softly. It matters. And before they could react, the server approached, a 25-year-old with the kind of professional tone you get from serving people who are rude with bad tips. And he looked at me, only me, and asked, Ma'am, is there anything I can bring you tonight? And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for. I smiled at him, then turned to Theodore, Sloane, the whole table of people who had treated me like spare decoration all evening. Actually, yes, I said, steady and even. I'd like to see the bill, please. And the whole table froze. The bill? Theodore repeated, laughing awkwardly. Natalie, what are you doing? And I continued, still looking at the server, the whole bill for the entire table, printed with itemized details. And he nodded slowly before walking away. Sloane shrieked with laughter, high-pitched. What are you doing? Making a scene over money on Theodore's birthday? And I said, I'm not making a scene. I just want to review the numbers. Humor me. And Theodore grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt, lowering his voice dangerously. What the hell are you doing? And I looked at his hand, his face. 8 years of marriage I had tried to save. Thousands of tiny humiliations I had swallowed. Thousands of times I told myself it would get better. Good to know, I said again, then gently removed his hand. The server returned with the leather folder and set it in front of me, and I opened it slowly. Nearly $8,000, 6 portions of $1,000 steak, wine by the bottle, not by the glass, appetizers priced like a month's rent for a small apartment, and even the dessert they hadn't eaten yet but had pre-ordered to show off. I stared at the number for a long moment, then closed the folder, pulled out my wallet, took out the unlimited titanium black card, placed it on top, and stood up. Natalie, Theodore hissed. Sit down, you're embarrassing yourself. No, I said quietly. I'm really not. Then turned to the server. I'll pay the full amount, plus 20% tip. But before you run the card, I need you to help me with one thing. And he nodded, confused but professional. And I said, help make sure my husband understands something. Then I looked straight at Theodore. This is the last time I ever pay for anything that benefits you. The last dinner, the last drink, everything. Consider it my birthday gift to you. Clarity. And Sloane shot to her feet. You can't. I can. I cut her off. And I am. And I added, you wanted to know if I have a backbone, if I have self-respect. Let me show you. And I placed my phone on the table, screen up, and pressed play. Theodore's voice filled the room like a blade slicing through the expensive silence. She actually thinks she's invited. I told her I ordered for her. It'll be hilarious. Then Sloane's voice. Let her sit and watch us eat. God, Natalie sitting there would be so embarrassing. Followed by, that's so mean. Perfect for your birthday. And Theodore, that's the highlight. And then the muffled sounds of moans, movement, their affair hanging in the air like rot. I stopped the recording, and the silence was absolute. Theodore pale as paper, Sloane looking like she'd been slapped, the whole table frozen, their $1,000 steaks suddenly tasting like nothing. So, I said, picking up my phone, I'll pay for this birthday dinner, every ridiculous bite, every overpriced sip. Consider it compensation for the performance. And I looked at the server. Run the card, please, and add an extra 1,000 for the tip. You deserve it. And he almost ran off from the tension. I looked at Theodore one last time. Happy birthday, I said. I hope this gift is exactly what you wanted. Then I walked out of LeClaire, into the cool November night, without looking back. Behind me, I heard Sloane. Screaming in anger, Theodore calling my name, the whole table erupting into chaos. But I was already gone, and this was only the beginning. The air outside tasted like freedom. I stood on the sidewalk outside Leclerc, the restaurant where I had just spent nearly $8,000 to watch my husband and his friends and his mistress treat me like I had never existed. And I inhaled the November air like it was the first real breath I'd taken in years. My phone had been vibrating nonstop, Theodore's name flashing once, twice, 3 times, the screen lighting up and fading like a heart trying to beat inside a dead body, and I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my email and checked the timestamp on the scheduled message. 20:59, right on time, meaning Theodore had now received the 127-page document detailing 6 years of fraudulent expenses, complete with receipts, dates, and side-by-side comparisons between what he reported and what he actually did. And the company executives had also received the email about his affair. Not because I intended to get him fired, but because I wanted to make sure the truth spoke louder than his excuses. My car was parked 3 blocks away, on purpose, because I knew I would need the walk, the stretch of quiet to let the adrenaline settle. The distance between the performance I had just ended and whatever was coming next, and it was a 12-year-old Toyota Corolla, fully paid off, sturdy, invisible. The kind of car Theodore's friends would never look at twice. He used to beg me to upgrade, to match the lifestyle, something that fit with the white G-Wagon, something that screamed we had money. And I refused every time, not because I couldn't afford it, I easily could, but because deep down, I knew there would come a day when I needed to be underestimated, needed to be judged wrongly. People always mistake silence for weakness, simplicity for poverty, humility for inability, and they're wrong. I slid into the driver's seat, my hand resting on the steering wheel, staring blankly ahead, the phone still vibrating like it was trying to shake itself apart. Theodore switching to text. Natalie. What the hell was that? You humiliated me in front of everyone. Natalie, answer me now. And I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the engine. The drive home took about 20 minutes, and I used every second of it to replay my plan for the next 48 hours. A checklist I had rehearsed for 2 weeks. Not impulsive at all. This was preparation. Our house was in Maple Ridge, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looked measured by a ruler, and every home was expensive enough to make people wonder what the owners did to afford it, and Theodore insisted we move there 3 years ago, right after his promotion. A big title, not a big raise. We need to live somewhere that reflects our status, he said, as if we were a brand instead of 2 people who once promised to love each other. I paid the down payment, the monthly mortgage, the landscaping, the furniture, the renovations, everything he claimed was necessary. I paid for it all while he used his salary to maintain the illusion that we were wealthier than we were. The house was dark when I pulled in. The spot where the white G-Wagon should have been completely empty, the repossession company having done its job well, and the confirmation email would arrive within the hour. I turned on only one light, the desk lamp in the tiny office next to the kitchen, the only room Theodore never stepped into because it looks like a storage closet. And he was right. It did look more like a storage room than an office, filled with old paintings I had made myself, tucked away because he said they didn't fit the aesthetic of the new house. But this was the only territory in this home that truly belonged to me. I sat down, opened my laptop, and saw 3 new emails. One from the repossession company confirming the car had been reclaimed without issue. One from Madeline Park, my attorney, short and clear. Documents are ready. Call when you're ready to sign. And one from the bank confirming the joint account had been converted to a personal account. Every automatic payment rerouted, the credit line frozen, and the money Theodore once called ours and spent freely without asking was now locked away, out of his reach forever. I didn't steal from him. I simply took back what had always been mine. A CT 4.1. The phone exploded again, and it wasn't just Theodore anymore. Sloane was calling too, her name appearing like a curse, and I declined the call, blocked her number, then blocked Harper, Vanessa, Thomas, Nathan as well, because I didn't need their excuses, judgments, or lectures. Theodore had called 17 times, and I listened to one voicemail only to see where he was in his emotional spiral, his voice shaking with anger. "You embarrassed me. Everyone thinks you're insane, Natalie. You played that recording. Do you even know what you just did? Call me back now." And I deleted the voicemail and opened a new document. For the next hour, I wrote, not a journal, not a confession, just a timeline, recording the first time Theodore made me feel small, the slow escalation of contempt, the moments love turned into poison, the money he spent, the lies he told, the ways he gradually erased me from my own life, and I recorded tonight. The empty plate, the laughter, the cruel pleasure they took in my pain, everything with dates and receipts, then saved it in 3 places, on my laptop, an external drive, and an encrypted cloud, in case Theodore, or his whole little circle, tried to rewrite history and turn me into the villain of my own story. Truth rarely beats narrative. People believe the version told the loudest, most emotionally, most publicly, and Theodore would tell his version, so I needed mine preserved. By midnight, the calls stopped, though texts still trickled in, and Theodore was probably drunk, at Sloane's house, or someone else's, surrounded by his friends, trying to stitch together a story explaining why I lost it, and I could imagine the things they'd say to justify his betrayal. "She's always been unstable," Sloane would add. "You should have left her ages ago." "Maybe the recording was edited," Vanessa would suggest, and Theodore would sit there, drinking expensive liquor, soaking in comfort and reassurance that he was the victim. Let them think that. Let them build whatever fantasy helps them sleep, because I knew what was coming next. At 1 a.m., the familiar sound of a Bentley rolled into the driveway, followed by voices. Theodore's sharp, angry pitch, Sloane's equally loud, and the front door slammed hard enough to shake the house. "Natalie!" Theodore roared. "Where the hell are you?" And I didn't move from my chair. Footsteps thudded up the stairs, down the hallway, closer and closer, until the office door burst open and Theodore stood there, hallway light behind him, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, eyes red, and Sloane behind him with her arms crossed, face full of judgment. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Theodore shouted, and I looked up, calm. "Nothing. For the first time in a long time, nothing is wrong with me." And they hurled blame, anger, accusations at me, and I let them talk. Then I stood. "Nothing," I said again, each word steady, solid. "For the first time in a long time, nothing is wrong with me. And you humiliated me in front of my friends and your mistress, and I paid for your dinner," I said. And Theodore yelled, "You played that recording. Do you know how you made me look?" And he stood right in front of me, but still raised his voice like that made him powerful. And I said, "Like a man trying to humiliate his wife at his own birthday dinner." "I didn't make you a joke, Theodore," I said. "I just provided evidence of your betrayal and who you really are." And Sloane stepped forward, fists clenched. "That was a private conversation." And I shot back, "A private plan to humiliate me publicly." And Sloane moved closer. "You have no rights." "I have every right," I said. "I'm still his wife, or did you forget that part? Both of you seemed to forget while planning your little show tonight." "It was just a joke," she said, but her voice trembled. "Really?" "Because no one laughed except you and his friends, and I sat there for 2 hours with an empty plate while you ate $1,000 steak I paid for and mocked my poverty." "Where exactly was the joke, Theodore? What part was funny?" And he looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Instead, he asked, "Where's my car?" And I answered, "Your car was bought under my name, the one you can't afford. It's been returned to the dealership." And his face drained, then flushed red, and the silence that followed was dangerous. Sloane found her voice first. "You can't do that." But that was why I consulted a lawyer before doing anything. Everything I did was completely legal. The joint account could be restructured, the credit cards in my name canceled, the auto loan in my name terminated. "We're done, Theodore, completely done." And he stared at me, searching my face for something. Doubt, hesitation, the weakness he'd always counted on. But he couldn't find it. Anymore. The divorce moved faster than I expected, with Madeline contacting Theodore's attorney and offering a deal. I wouldn't pursue criminal charges if he accepted all of my terms, and the terms were simple: 50% of all marital assets, selling the penthouse and splitting the proceeds evenly, and generous spousal support calculated according to his real income, not the conveniently reduced number he planned to report. His lawyer tried to bargain, find loopholes, talk about legality, reputation, public fallout. But Madeline didn't budge, and during a conference call I was allowed to listen to, she said bluntly, "Your client has committed multiple offenses. He illegally surveilled his wife in private circumstances. He defrauded clients and the company. And he attempted to destroy her financially and emotionally. We have clear evidence of all of it. Your client has two choices: accept these extremely lenient terms to avoid criminal prosecution, or face both civil and criminal court, in which case he will lose everything and possibly go to prison. You have 24 hours to decide." And the decision didn't take long because Theodore said yes within 18 hours. The divorce proceeded quickly, expedited paperwork, no prolonged litigation, no noisy courtroom drama, just legal documents laying out the truth and framing the end of a marriage. And I got everything I asked for: the final settlement, closing at $4.7 million, my portion of the assets, plus 3 years of post-divorce support. Money wasn't the end goal, it was justice, the restoration of everything he tried to take from me. On the third day after the divorce, my sister Lauren found me. I turned my phone on for an hour to check messages, and she called immediately. "Where are you?" she asked urgently. "Everyone is looking for you. His family, Theodore?" "All of them." "I'm safe," I replied. "That's all you need to know." "Nat, what you did?" She paused. "I heard everything, what he did to you." Her voice cracked, and she went quiet for a moment. "Are you okay? Truly okay?" "I will be," I said, and I believed it. We talked for another hour, and only then did I learn that after I left the restaurant, someone had picked up the phone I left behind and opened the evidence file, passing it around. No one knows who leaked it, but now, even though Theodore and I were divorced, his reputation was already ruined. He tried to salvage it, but failed. Too many people saw too much. I felt something. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Something colder, cleaner, justice. He destroyed himself, I said, with the very people he trusted. And Theodore kept falling. His company fired him immediately and filed for damages over the fraudulent invoices. The clients he scammed came forward demanding justice and filing their own suits. A Cayman Islands account surfaced in his tax records, prompting an IRS investigation for tax evasion. And Wilma, someone who used to be his friend and later publicly condemned him, appeared on media channels with evidence and accusations, wiping out any last trace of sympathy he might have had, turning him into a cautionary tale, a prime example of how ambition rotted into cruelty will always end up devouring itself. I started therapy on a Tuesday morning, waking up with a familiar headache and a tightness in my chest that felt like someone was gripping my ribs. And Dr. Klein's office sat on a quiet street, the faint scent of lavender drifting from an oil diffuser, the leather sofa so soft that the moment I sat down, I felt myself sink into it. During the first session, I sat there with my hands gripping the edge of the cushion, eyes fixed on the glossy wooden floor reflecting my worn-out Converse. I don't know where to start," I whispered, my voice trembling like words were something fragile. Dr. Klein offered a small smile, her voice warm like a cup of tea in winter. "Start wherever you feel safest. Maybe with the fear you're carrying." And I told her everything, about the parties where I shrank behind Theodore, about how my mouth went dry every time I had to talk to his friends, about the panic that washed over me like a wave whenever I thought about facing the world. My body reacted, heart pounding, cold sweat breaking out, limbs going numb as if frozen solid. And she listened, taking notes with a pen that made a soft clicking sound against her notebook, then looked up. "Natalie," she said slowly, her eyes seeing through the shell I had built. Your fear of people isn't an illness. It's your body's rational response to prolonged betrayal and manipulation. You lived in an environment where every word could be turned into a weapon, every gesture judged. Your body is protecting you. It's saying, don't trust, don't open up. And I sat there with tears rolling hot and salty down my cheeks, and for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of crying. It felt like rain washing away built-up dust. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice breaking, and she replied, "Acknowledge it. And start again, with small steps. Talk to an old friend. Take a walk and smile at a stranger. Your body will relearn that the world isn't always an enemy." And so I began to heal. Not through sudden strength, but through tiny, almost invisible shifts. Writing down my feelings instead of swallowing them, saying, "I need a minute," instead of enduring in silence. Taking deep breaths when my heart raced without blaming myself. No one saw those things. No one cheered for those small victories. But I knew. Every steady breath was a piece of myself returning. A piece no longer crushed by the invisible hand named Theodore. I began rebuilding myself, and during the marriage I had shrunk bit by bit, like land being eaten away by the sea, staying silent so Theodore could inflate his ego, shutting down my own needs so he wouldn't snap, apologizing simply for existing. Now I finally had space to remember who I was before him and who I could become after leaving him, and I returned to painting, the thing I once loved, the thing that had sold a few pieces before I stopped for reasons I didn't want to remember. In my small new apartment, I set up an easel, plain, imperfect, and I began pouring out everything that had shattered inside me. Dark shapes, scraped layers, women standing up from ashes, eyes, doors shutting. A gallery owner happened to see my work at a group show and stood in front of my painting so long I thought she was waiting for someone, and she said, "These are real. Painful, but necessary. People need to see them." 6 months after the divorce, my first solo exhibition opened, and I called it The Empty Plate, with every piece revolving around being dismissed, betrayed, diminished, and reclaimed. And the opening night was so crowded I felt like I was dreaming. And by the end of the night, the entire show had sold out. Critics called it a surgical exploration in color of emotional violence and the silent rage of women. But I called it healing. 1 year after that birthday night, I saw Theodore again, not on purpose. I was sitting in a cafe in Brooklyn, waiting to meet the gallery owner for a new project when he walked in. He looked bad. The luxury suit's gone. Just wrinkled jeans and a shirt. Thinner, graying, hollowed out like something had drained him, looking at least 10 years older. We saw each other from across the room. Then he walked over. "Natalie!" "Theodore," I said, flat. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, all the confidence he once used to call me the embarrassment of his life in front of his friends completely gone, and only a worn-out man remained. "Can I sit?" he asked, and I almost refused, almost walked out, but I nodded. "5 minutes," I said, and he sat heavily, like gravity treated him differently now. "I'm sorry," he said after a long silence. "I know an apology changes nothing, but I need to say it." And I didn't respond, just waited. "I was cruel," he continued. "I was too busy chasing status and wealth and unhealthy connections to remember the love we had." And I asked softly, "Did you ever actually love me, Theodore?" And he said, "I don't know anymore. This past year I've been trying to figure out the moment I turned into the person who did those things." "And did you?" "No," he said, looking down at his hands, trembling slightly. "I ruined everything. Career, reputation, marriage. For what? For Sloan, who left me the second things got messy. For money I'll spend a lifetime paying back in lawsuits." He gave a dry, empty laugh, then looked up, eyes red and rimmed. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it honestly. "No." He blinked, surprised. "I used to, but hate takes energy, and you're not worth that energy anymore. You're just someone I used to know, someone who showed me how strong I really am. And he nodded slowly. I heard about your exhibition. Your paintings. They're powerful. Then he asked in a small voice, Are the broken figures in them me? And I shook my head. I paint survival. You're just something I survived. And he took that without flinching. Maybe he was used to pain now. I work at a support center now, he said, helping people who can't afford services. Doesn't pay much, but at least it's decent work. Maybe in a few years, if I'm lucky, I'll start over, try to rebuild my life. Good luck, I said, standing up. My 5 minutes were done. He rose too. Natalie, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but maybe someday? No, I cut in. We shouldn't see each other again. And I turned to leave when he called after me. Natalie, no matter what, I'm glad you turned out the way you did. And I looked back at him one last time. The man who betrayed me, who laughed at my pain, now standing there small, faded, meaningless to my life. And then I stepped outside into the autumn sunlight, bright enough to almost hurt. 1 year later, I was in my new studio, a real studio, not just a corner of a rented apartment, putting the final stroke on a new painting when my phone rang. It was Lauren. I'm here, I said, holding the phone between my shoulder and ear while still mixing paint. What's up? And she said, Just wanted to know if you're coming to Sunday dinner? Wouldn't miss it, I laughed. How are the kids? And we talked for a few minutes about them, about her work, about little ordinary things I never used to have room to appreciate. Ever since the divorce, our relationship had gotten so much better, and Lauren said she felt like she had finally gotten back the sister Theodore had kept hidden for so many years. I hung up and stepped back to look at the painting I'd just finished, and it was different from my earlier pieces. Brighter, still holding shadows, because I will always paint shadows. They're part of my story, but this time light cut through the layers, carrying hope and recovery and transformation. I titled it Through, and the gallery owner who first discovered my work wanted to host another solo show focused on rebuilding, on who we become when we refuse to let life break us. I also had a new boyfriend, Mateo. Kind, funny, knowing nothing about my past except that I'm an artist who likes oat milk lattes. And we had been on 3 dates so far, and I was taking things slow, learning to trust again, but it felt good, easy. I was no longer the woman who sat at the dinner table watching everyone else eat. That woman died that night, and someone stronger rose from the ashes. I no longer had panic attacks. The old anxiety now just soft waves I could notice but no longer drown in. I slept. I laughed more. I trusted my own intuition. And from the wreckage, I built a new life. Sometimes I remembered that birthday dinner, the moment I laid the gift in front of him and watched his face fall. But it was exactly what he deserved, and it set me free. I was no longer Theodore's ex-wife. I was Natalie Morrison, an artist, a survivor, someone who refused to be broken. I turned back to the painting and added the final bright strokes that made the light feel like it was coming from my own chest. And tomorrow, I would meet Mateo. We'd drink coffee and talk about simple things. Books, music, architecture we both loved. Outside the studio window, the sun was setting, the sky washed in gold and pink like the pastels I often used, and I set my brush down, washed my hands, and got ready for a walk. As I locked the studio door, I paused at the mirror, and the woman looking back was healthy, whole, radiant, and I was proud of her. More than any revenge, more than any justice, that was the greatest gift I had given myself. I survived, I bloomed, I became a version of myself even my past self wouldn't dare dream of. I smiled at my reflection, then stepped into the evening, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. Behind me, acknowledged, but no longer defining me, remembered, but no longer limiting me. The future was mine now, and it would be bright. And if you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. And if this story touched something in you, leave a comment about what you want to begin again, and if you want to walk with me through the next journeys of rebirth. Hit subscribe, and we'll meet again.